What we're going to talk about in today's video is a client I've been working with for a long time now. In fact, this was probably the first very large prospect I spoke with as I started to branch off on my own. I remember the day he called up, he was referred from someone else, and one of the things he said in that initial phone call was, I just want to be able to pay in at least $500,000 per year. If I can do that with these policies, I'm good. Now I'm a young guy trying to get started on my own. I'm like, whoa, what? No, not quite like that, but I was excited and a little nervous at the same time, or I should say very nervous. But long story short, he started policies, 2 of them actually. He has aggressively funded them. Fast forward the clock to today, his total premium and PUA payments, total money he's paid in, is just about $3 million between these 2 policies. Now, he's been aggressively using his policies through the loan feature for his business. He's got numerous things going on in business. He is a physician by trade. However, he's involved in projects that have to do with building hospitals and such. So he's always moving very, very fast. But what we're going to talk about today is really how he set the policies up, what his initial plan was with respect to funding the policies aggressively, but then cooling off on the funding. And now he's at a stage where it makes more sense to begin to address those loans. So his plan initially was to aggressively fund the policies. Remember that first phone call? He said, I just want to be able to fund the policies with $500,000 per year. And he's done that. Some years it's been more than that actually. So his policy started back in 2014 and 2015. He started in his early 30s. And again, the original plan was to be able to pay in $500,000 per year, more than that. And some years he has paid in more than that. However, he planned on using the policies and he used them aggressively right out of the gates. He waited about 1 policy year before he aggressively loaned against them because he did want to get a lot of capital into the policies first. But he has been taking loans and heavily using the policies, borrowing, repaying, and constantly repeating that process. Now, after he aggressively funded the policies, his plan was, and this is what he's done, to reduce the funding to about $150K per year total between both of the policies. So instead of aggressively funding them around $500,000 plus, cool off on the funding and then take that cash flow he was using to heavily fund the policies and do what? Redirect that cash flow to begin repaying loans. So where he's at right now, total funding again, just about $3 million. You'll see the exact dollar amount he's paid in thus far. What we're going to look at is the cash value growth. We'll look at the yearly cash value growth. We'll also look at the total growth. We'll see how much he has in total cash value that is earning dividends and interest for him right now. So you can see the total gain since day 1 up until now. So if he's paid in $3 million, what's his total cash value? You'll see that exact number. Now, what I want to hit on here is something interesting. If you've done research around whole life insurance and know terms like non-direct and direct recognition, you'll be familiar with this. If you haven't, this will be enlightening. So the 2 policies he took out policy A, Mass Mutual, that's what he started with. That is a non-direct recognition policy. And then policy B, Guardian, that is a direct recognition policy. However, he started this policy a while back. When he started that policy, it had a fixed loan rate of 8%. That's significant when we look at the direct recognition treatment and how they still treat outstanding loans with an 8% loan rate with respect to what they pay in dividends. It's actually pretty cool. So let's hit on the basics first, just of non-direct recognition with his Mass Mutual policy. So when he started, Mass Mutual's dividend rate was 7.1%. It's come down over time. It's at 6% flat right now. His variable loan interest rate is still at 5%. It's been at 5% since day 1. So how non-direct recognition works is that the insurance company does not recognize the fact that you take out a loan with respect to how they apply dividends to your policy. To illustrate, if you have $100,000 in cash value and you don't touch it, that dividend rate of 6% is applied to that $100,000. And just to hit on this point, that does not mean it's earning 6%. Remember that a dividend rate is always a gross rate that's applied to your policy after the insurance expenses and such. We want to look at the net growth rate, or IRR, if we want to see what that actual rate is. But What is true, the dividend rate that the company is applying to whole life insurance policies, if I don't touch it, I get that on the full $100,000. Now, if I elect to take a policy loan, here's how it works. I've got interest at 5% that I'm going to pay on that $50,000. That'd be $2,500 to the insurance company. However, because the company is non-direct recognition, they do not recognize that that loan is outstanding and continue to apply the same dividend rate of 6% to any money outstanding in loans and what's still remaining in cash value, additional equity I can borrow, meaning that dividend rate of 6% is always applied to the total cash value or the gross cash value. Gross cash value represents any money that's still in equity, cash value I can borrow, and what is outstanding in loans. Versus direct recognition. If I don't touch it, I'll receive whatever the company's basic dividend interest rate is. In this example, for 2023, 5.75%. Now, I've got an 8% cost to borrow, which makes it look ugly on paper because I'm earning 5.75 and I've got a fixed loan rate of 8%. So that 8% cost to borrow goes to the insurance company. Here's how direct recognition works, and this is specific to Guardian, is the unborrowed funds, in this example, still receive the basic dividend rate. However, the borrowed funds, the company recognizes the fact that I have borrowed against my policy and they apply a dividend rate that is different from the standard dividend rate. Guardian, their practice has been for a long time and still is to apply a dividend rate that is equal to the loan rate on outstanding loan dollars. So in a case like this, to simplify, if I let it sit and grow, let's say the next year I've got $104,000 if I don't loan. If I borrow and then repay, let's say I repay it over 12 months, my cash value might be 105. It's going to be higher because the outstanding loan portion received a higher dividend interest rate. Now I also need to take into consideration the fact that I'm paying more loan interest than I am up here, but that higher dividend bump does make the value look a little bit better than what it would have been as if I never touched it in the first place. It's a nice item to be aware of because a lot of times people hear direct recognition and they feel that the company doesn't pay a dividend on outstanding loans or it's reduced. Not the case. Depends on the carrier and their practice. With Guardian, this is an older contract with an 8% loan rate. And I'll tell you this, it's different for those that have different loan interest rates. All new policies now have a 5% fixed loan interest rate. There was a time where it was a 6% fixed loan interest rate as well. I would check out any of our videos that go through Guardian or direct recognition to find more transparency on how that works. But anyway, the purpose of explaining that is when you see the loan repayment models for his Guardian policy, it's going to be pretty cool where you see that cash value significantly higher than what it would have been if he doesn't have any loans outstanding. So let's begin with the cash value growth. We'll look at policy A first, which is MassMutual, and these are his total cash values. So this assumes he does not have a loan outstanding, can always obtain that figure from a life insurance company. That'll be your total cash value or gross cash value, because the insurance company is always going to apply dividends on the total balance. If they're direct recognition, they're going to do the same. It's just going to be a bit different depending on how much is outstanding in loans. But in this example, so we've got Mass, total cash value, and I had prepared this the end of March 23rd, 2023. Total funding into this policy, a little over 1.1 million. Cash value as of March 23rd, $1,193,000. He's in policy year 8 right here. Now, right below this, you see policy year 8. Annual funding 0 because he's already made the payment. His policy anniversary date for this policy is June. So June of this year, less than 3 months from now, being March, the cash value is going to increase to $1.214 million. It's an increase of $21,000. That's the dividends and interest that is being applied to the policy between now and June of this year. So I did want to add that because from the time of when we ran this illustration and when he had questions on his policy until the time of his policy anniversary date, he is going to see a little jump in cash value. Now we've got his total payments here, 1.12 million. Cash value, about 1.2 million. Total gain, close to $100,000 on this particular policy. And his plan is to continue to fund $100K per year. We did look at options with stopping the payments altogether, but he said, I'll continue to fund this one. He has the means to do so, and he likes the idea of constantly adding more money to the product for the cash value and death benefit. So we see the annual cash value growth and then the total gain over time. He has done a fantastic job starting so young, because when we look at him, by the time he hits age 60, with this policy alone, talking some large numbers there. And this is with one policy. This is a smaller one. Let's take a look next at policy B. Policy B, we know, is Guardian. Same thing here, March 23rd, when we prepared the illustration. Policy anniversary date is April with Guardian. So his total funding, $1.86 million. As of the date of running the illustration, $2.1 million. Once dividends and interest are applied, what's the cash value? 2.166. So what's the growth? $62,000, meaning from when he requested this information compared to his anniversary date, which is within a couple weeks of preparing the illustration, he'll see the dividends and interest applied to his policy, which come out to $62,000 and change. So he's pumped a lot of money into this policy. The total gain then in April, $305 and change. And then we see if he just continues to fund the premium, there's the growth over time. Now this is very flexible. He can add additional funds into PUAs 100% at his discretion, which is what he has been doing. He went with a larger Guardian policy for that flexibility, which worked out nicely because just as a business owner, when cash flow fluctuates, having the ability to dump in whenever, that was very, very valuable to him. So there we go. We've got the two policies side by side. What I like to do in a case like this, because looking at this is a lot of information and it can be overwhelming to some. I say some because some people love this, right? If you're very analytical, you might look at this and say, hey, add some more reports, perhaps some graphs and such, so I can track the overall value, and that's perfectly fine. Or you might look at it and say, hey, just send me a quick snapshot with the current values as of today. That's all I want. So we can condense it, make it more complicated. We've got a lot going on here. We are going to simplify it, I promise. On the far right, we've got the combined values. So what we can do if we'd like, why don't we simplify it a bit right now? How's that? So now we've got the combined values here, both policies. We see what the cash value will hit at the beginning of policy year 8 for both of them. Total payments, just about $3 million. Total cash value, close to 3.4. There's the total gain of $400,000. There's the funding, has the option to add a lot more, but at this point in time, I'm not recommending it. The main reason why is because we do want to begin to address the loans. You're going to see the loan balance in a couple minutes here when we get to that piece. These are the gross cash values. His net values are much lower because he's got large loans outstanding. But this allows us to see what the cash value is growing by each year, which is particularly valuable if he wants to compare this with what he is paying in loan interest, if he wants to look at the two side by side, which I like looking at that. So, policy A, which is MassMutual here. What we've got on the left, the growth scenario we just looked at. What we have on the right, the loan and repay. So let's just call this repay loan. And again, this is the non-direct recognition policy being with MassMutual. So his funding, $100K per year. These are the illustrations. We ran the illustrations and just dropped them right onto Excel as it makes it a lot easier. Of course, we provide the illustrations as well, as that's extremely important. But current loan balance, $933,000. So what we're assuming here is kicking down the funding, paying the loan interest each year. So as it comes due, we're assuming it's paid, so there it is due. And purple is the payment. and then applying $150,000 toward the principal. So if this is you, how much are you allocating in total cash flow to this policy? 100, let's round up, call it 150, plus another 150, about 300K. That's toward this policy. How much were you allocating toward the policies both combined before? 500K, a little bit more in some years, in fact. But now we're redirecting it. And it doesn't have to be 150K per year toward the principal. If we do that, what you can also say is, hey, I'm paying less and less in loan interest each year. We can pay it back however we want. This is aggressive. We could pay it back over 20 years. It doesn't matter. The main thing I want to highlight here, and this was of interest to him, is when it's repaid, what's your cash value and death benefit? 2415, death benefit is 11.3. What do you got over here? Identical. And this is the scenario with no loans outstanding. And you'll see this with a non-direct recognition policy because you're continuing to earn the same dividend on the entire balance. So when I borrow and repay, everything's restored to what it would have been as if I never touched it in the first place. Constant compounding, very easy to follow too. Non-direct recognition, that is. Let's look at policy B. Policy B. All right, there we go. This is the Guardian policy, and we're going to add a report here too. This will be fun. So on the left, the growth scenario. On the right, loan and repay. All right, net cash value right now, $58,000 and change. End of this year, 118 after the dividends are applied. Okay, and this is with the loan outstanding. Loan balance about $2 million bucks. He's aggressively used this policy, both of them. So what do we got here? Funding the $50,000 plus 150 toward the principal plus the loan interest here. So what's he allocating over here? About 340, about 300 toward the other. Total, that is. So you call it 640 this year, which will get less and less each year as that interest is chipped away. But if he looks at that and says, it's a little high right now, I don't know that that's realistic, that's okay. This is just a schedule. What I would do is fund the premium. If you still want to, you can stop the premium now to use that to attack the loan and then resume premium payments later. I did run that as an option, but anyway, my point is it is something he can do, but if he says, no, I want to keep paying that, well then what I would do is pay that in the interest and then just reduce this amount, and it would take a bit longer to pay it down. And in some years, if you can pay it down more aggressively, that's great. But we track it over time is the main thing. But here, look at this. So he's repaying the loan. Look at it when it's repaid, year 22. What do you notice there in the cash value in particular? There's a big difference, isn't there? Close to about $400,000. Why is there so much of a difference? Because we didn't add more money into the funding. That's exactly the same when we look at the two side by side. The reason why, this example to the left assumes that the dividend rate of 5.75% is being applied to the total cash value. The example to the right, the loan and repayment scenario, is different. This assumes a dividend of 5.75 to whatever your remaining cash value is. But then it assumes dividend of 8% to the outstanding loan portion. So if we were to run an additional report in the illustration software, which discloses the dividend, and then compare these two illustrations side by side, that's where it would really jump out at you, as you would see a much higher dividend in this example. And that's because we've got a high loan balance outstanding. Now, to be fair to both sides here, we're paying higher loan interest too. So with that said, when we repay it here, we see our value is much higher. So if this is me, I want to know how much higher. And for simplicity, let's just do this. Let's pick it up when the loan is paid back. Put that in the same color. And this is the total gain. Highlight this in yellow over here. So we see the difference now in the total gain as a result of that higher dividend. But again, I'm tempted here just to do it right now to say, okay, what's the total interest we paid? Because that is going to offset the additional earnings in some ways. But I mean, this is an attractive feature in my opinion, because I do see higher value at the end of the day. Let's look at the combined values. We'll wrap everything up with this. So we've got the combined values with the scenario of not touching it, which is just the gross cash values we pulled from the insurance carriers and then ran in-force illustrations, assuming the loan was paid off altogether, compared to gradually repaying it. So here you go. 150 plus 300, 450, plus about another 190, call it. That's your total cash flow out of pocket, blue and purple. Now, just like a line of credit, as you apply funds toward the principal and add money to the policy, that cash value builds up. Knowing him, he's not just going to repay it until the balance is 100% restored and then start to use it again. Probably what he's going to do, and this is me just guessing based on his payment history and how he's used the policies very, very frequently, is as he's applying funds, he's probably going to continue to borrow against it as he's used it a lot like a line of credit, add more money to the policy. This could fluctuate some years. He may elect to kick it down, although I doubt it, just based on his patterns thus far. But my point is, he'll continue to use it like a personal line of credit. The main thing here on that death benefit, he started his policies very young, early 30s. During our initial discussions, we did talk about the death benefit, and at some point in time, from an estate planning standpoint, he may want to look at trust planning and such, just because he's got an estate tax liability with everything else that he has going on. So in that particular case, it will make sense for him at some point to look at some estate planning, involve a trust or trusts. This way he can pass the money on very efficiently. However, since day one, he said, okay, that's great and all. I am concerned about it, but my priority right now is this, because I want to use it to accelerate my business. So he's been doing exactly that. Anyway, this was a lot of fun. Hopefully it gave you some insight as to the kind of stuff we like to do for those we work with after a policy is in force. This is definitely a bit more involved just because we're looking at different strategies. The actual report or scenarios I ran was a bit more because there were some questions and just things that I would want to see if him and I flipped positions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please hit the like button and subscribe for more. Let us know if you have any questions at all. And as always, I hope this helps. Thanks so much. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.